My friends are getting married and they asked me to officiate their wedding. Poor choice on their part, but I'm still committed to it. And it happens to be a Haunted Mansion themed wedding, which I'm obsessed with. And when that opportunity comes, I need to make a new outfit for it. I was going to go with kind of more of just like the classic like Haunted Mansion butler look, but I thought like that's kind of weird to have a butler officiate a wedding, so I didn't want to go with that route anymore. So instead I wanted to kind of make a little more like mysterious robes, you know? But also it's a wedding, so I want to make it something I can kind of remove and be a little bit more comfortable in. So I've decided on 3 different garments I'm going to make. First one will be kind of a Haunted Mansion green robe. Just very simple, plain green. And then a satin stole that I'm going to embroider some of the Haunted Mansion wallpaper on. And then underneath that will be my regular outfit, which will just be a green vest with embroidered Haunted Mansion wallpaper on it. These are my fabrics that I've picked up. Very Haunted Mansion. I got this lovely velveteen for accents on the vest. Because I'm not likely to probably ever use this robe again. I'm not putting a lot of effort into the robe. It's going to be very simple. Basically just a standard yoke, long flowing middle, kind of bellish style sleeves. And it'll just close in the front with hook and eye. Stole. A bit more dramatic because it is kind of more the flavor that goes on top of the robe. Just long and kind of swoops down in the back, just kind of standard religious style stole. And then of course the vest is just your standard tailored style vest. I have made many vests in my life. I used to actually have enough that I could wear a different one in every day of the month. And then I got fat. And none of them fit anymore, and therefore my pattern doesn't fit anymore. And so I'm really excited to redraft this vest pattern so that it'll fit so that I can get back into my vest era. The other part of this outfit, this is just a placeholder vest. But I purchased this shirt. I rarely purchase shirts online. I knew I wasn't going to have time to, make this shirt. Just a cheap, brocade shirt. And then I got this really fun little pin that I'm debating on using as more of kind of like just a regular brooch, or if I should wear a tie. Those are things I can deal with later. But that's kind of the base for everything. I purchased this without knowing what this looked like, and it's not perfect, but it's not bad. Honestly, I don't think I could have done better even if I had had the shirt. Purples are hard to find. Alright, now to actually make the pattern, I'm going to use an existing pattern, which is just my standard shirts. That already has all my shoulder and all that kind of already figured out, so it's a great jumping off point. Just kind of trace it out, use that as the base, and I'm going to start off with the yoke for the robe here. So I want it to be a little bit further away from my neck, so I'm going to take it in, about a half an inch or so. I also want the yoke to drop down about 10 inches from my neckline, and I want it to kind of come together about 10 inches from my shoulder. So that's my new neckline. I'm going to drop the arm here quite a bit because it's a robe and I want it to be kind of loose fitting. Do the same thing for the back piece. I've also just made this little piece that's got the line to continue the arm seam so that I can cut this out of the corners of the main part of the robe here because these are just plain old rectangles, and the only part that I actually need patterned is that little tiny bit. I can just line this up to the edges of the rectangles and slice out that armhole. Alright, for the sleeve, just taped together a lot of pieces of paper and folded it over. It's a symmetrical piece. I can just design half of it. I do want to gather this, so I've made it really, really well. Now that I've cut that out, I have the full piece there. And that's the pattern for the robe. As for the stole, I did the same thing. I took the shirt pattern and kind of cut out what I needed it to be. And for the long part in the front here, the majority of it is symmetrical. Then I've got kind of a curve here, so it actually kind of sits on my shoulder correctly. I'm repeating it again for the vest. To create this lapel, I'm just going to do a fold over. I've got the point at my shoulder and the point that I want the vest to go down to. I've just drawn a very straight line. And then on this side, I can design the shape of the lapel, whatever I want it to be. That's the shape that I want. And then that's going to be, and that's the shape of the piece I'll end up cutting out. Then I've just made the width that I need. I've also added in a pocket and done kind of that pointed tip in the front here. And then that's the pattern piece for the actual pocket and the flap that'll cover up the hole. Because I want this fold-over piece to be a velveteen. I don't want the entire front here to be lined in velveteen, so that'd be very uncomfortable and warm. I'm going to duplicate this piece exactly. I want to continue, about an inch or so from that fold line in. So I've just marked it, make sure to get it underneath the pattern. I'm also going to mark any of my other important little knobs and stuff. I've just cut all the way around it, and that'll be an exact copy. And I've connected that line, a couple of marks just to make sure everything's lined up correctly. I'm going to cut down that line. I'm going to re-add seam allowance where I just cut. Then now I've got a piece that I can cut out of the velveteen, and one I can cut out of just the regular lining. So it'll look like velvet continues all the way on the inside, but it won't. Now back, same thing, just tracing it out. Only I'll also be matching up like the sides and things like that. I've also put a dart in where my waist is, and made a kind of little flap thing. Then put some grommets in, and I'm going to try and actually tuck into that dart, and that'll be my vest closure. And that is the vest pattern. And the last thing I have to design. So where I'm at now is that I have all the costume patterns made, and I plan to make a mock-up of the vest, just because the fit of that matters a little bit more. But right now I'm going to work on the stole because I don't have to worry about the fit of the stole. I know it's going to fit. But because I have to do 3 embroideries on it, and each one of those embroideries takes over an hour, I'm just going to start that, and then I can cut out the rest of it and start sewing the vest on a different machine. Now, there's 2 different ways you can kind of embroider things. Well, 3. There's 3 different ways you can embroider things. You can embroider embroider the fabric and then cut the pattern out of the embroidered fabric. You can cut the fabric and then embroider that fabric, or you can make the whole thing and then embroider the actual garment. Each one has its different reasons for doing it, but in my experience, because you're adding a bunch of threads onto the fabric, sometimes the fabric can actually change sizes and shapes a little bit. So I like to embroider the fabric and then cut it out. But that comes with its own unique issues, because that means you have to cut kind of around it and then center all of your embroidery like after that. And that's what I'm going to do. So I made just kind of a copy of kind of the general space that the design takes up, and I can use it to kind of position where I want it to be. I like where that is, so I've marked where the center, and that's where I'll center my pattern. And then same on the back piece here. So you can see I've got a really wide area around it. So if the embroidery kind of ends up skewed or out of place or something, I've got enough wiggle room that I can kind of adjust the pattern to where I need it to be. I've got those centers marked. So I've got the first piece centered, and then that means that I can start it. Woohoo! So that's going to take an hour. I'm going to work on a mock-up of the vest. Now, I'm particularly lazy. I do not like putting work into like a mock-up if I can't use it. I'm going to use this lovely red and make myself a red vest and adjust if I need to from there. So as I mentioned, this is a mock-up, which means I'm trying to spend any money on it. This is actually an old backdrop I used to do for photographing my art. The black lining and the satin I'm going to use as the contrast are just scraps. The point of this is that I'm not testing it out on the expensive fabric, which in my case is going to be fabric that I'm going to be embroidering. So I'm going to be spending tens of hours trying to embroider this fabric before I cut into it. And I don't want to adjust that fabric. I want to adjust this one or have this one not fit. But I do also want to point out, like, look at how efficient a use of space this pattern is. All right, so the vest is cut out. I'm about halfway through the second embroidery for the stole. I was talking about sewing this on a separate machine, but I'm hungry, so I'm going to go eat. And by the time I get back from that, this should be done. And then I can just cut out the green robe, and then the other one should be done. And then I'll have my nice machine, which I got from sewingpartsonline.com. Go check them out, to sew the vest. Which will be nice because my other machine is really not very good. All right, so I've pinned the patterns together, so they're together on each side. Then I've centered the pattern on that, and now I can cut it out. And there we've got two even stole ends. I'm also cutting out the back with the lining, which I'm just using a black cotton. Both to, do two tasks at once, but also then for sure it's the same shape and all that. So I changed the plans. I'm going to finish up the stole first, just because cut satin tends to fray a lot. I just can get it done right now. You'll notice I am keeping the stabilizer in the project. I'm just doing that as it's just kind of giving a little bit more stability to kind of the ends so they won't flop around as much. But I am going to round off these corners because a rounded edge looks better than a pointed edge, and you will still be able to tell if there's something underneath there. Great, sewing the shoulder pieces together. So now what I'm doing is I am flat lining the lining onto this. I've got the wrong sides together, and I'm just going to stitch very close to the edge here. So now I'm going to trim really close to that stitching. I have this black bias tape, and then I'm just going to stitch that right on. And so there it is, mostly finished. It makes a nice kind of very clean edge. And the only thing left to do is to add tassels. Now these tassels have a longer loop on them, but I want it to be closer to the edge. So I tie a knot, clip it off, and then melt it closed with a lighter. And then I just hand stitched on. Moving now onto the robe. Pretty straightforward on this. It's just constructing yoke, which is self-lined, so it's just basically two layers of the same fabric. Right, I've sewn both layers of shoulders together, and I just stitched together with the front and the neck hole. This is actually a lining fabric that I've chosen. I did that for a couple of reasons. First off, it's a little bit cheaper. As I said, I'm probably ever going to only use this once. I was trying to keep the cost as low as I could. But another reason is that this doesn't wrinkle very well. I don't have to worry about it like creasing or anything, particularly because I'm not going to have a dressing room or anything. I just need to be able to put this on and wear it and be good for photos. But I don't necessarily recommend working with this fabric for like regular garments because it is very slick, very thin, and a little bit hard to work with. Just getting it through the machine and all of that. Flip the corners and the curve. Fabric is actually so lightweight and thin that my scissors is actually having a hard time cutting it. Flip it right side out, and I'm going to press it. I'm going to top stitch closed all of the other open sides. And that's the yoke. Place that off to the side. I've just quick stitched up the sleeve. I did a simple French seam, which is where I just sew a 1/4 inch seam, trim it down, flip it inside out, stitch a 3/8 seam. I guess maybe it was a 1/2 inch seam. It should equal out to about 5/8 inch. But if you start out sewing with the wrong sides together, when you flip it inside out to the second one, that kind of neatly keeps all the seam nice and good looking on the inside. Because like when I'm wearing it, you're going to be able to see that inside section of the sleeve, and it's just a little bit more sightly than like a serged edge. I also just hemmed it, gave everything good press, and then those are set. For the skirt of the robe, I've just gone ahead and the front opening flaps, I've just done a hem on. Then again, on these sides, I'm going to do a French seam, which I'm going to do a little bit wider just because it has the selvage edge on it. I'll probably end up actually sewing to about a 5/8, trimming it down, and then flipping it inside out to do the 3/8. Okay, so taking the yoke again, attach the skirt to it, going to start with the back. And so I'm going to be doing a French seam again. So I've got the wrong sides together. I'm just going to be pinning some pleats, which I'm doing just by pinning each end, doing half, doing half, doing half, and then taking this loop, and then folding it over at where the pin goes. Well, I did switch directions of where the pleats go, just for the back, because I think it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to do that, I guess it would be 1/2 inch stitch, and then trim it down, flip it inside out, repin it, and then stitch at the 3/8. Not 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. There we are, and I'm going to do it the same way on the front pieces. Thing is sitting in the sleeve, nothing too special, just setting it like I normally would, and then having the extra gathered at the top by the shoulder. And I'm just going to stitch it regularly and then just serge it because nobody will see that seam. For closures, I've just done a couple of hooks and eyes kind of tucked in there. It creates a nice kind of like not cluttered front. To keep the stole on, I have also attached some hooks and eyes, so I don't have to worry about that like slipping around or anything. And with that, I can get started on the vest. Right now I'm making the mock-up of the vest. I went ahead and made these little tabs that have grommets in them. And these will be the ties in the back that I'll lace up so I can adjust the fit. And I put these in almost all of my doublets and vests. And I used to just kind of stitch them this way, flip it over, stitch it over again. And then I realized that almost everything I have has darts in it, and I can just put it in the dart. So that's what I do these days. So I've just pinned, the dart as I normally would, just instead of in the middle, I've tucked that in and then pinned it in place. And when I stitch it down, I got them just neatly tucked in the dart. On the front, I have to do the pocket. So first I'm going to do the little rectangles that'll kind of cover up the pocket hole. And that's just sewing up the sides as it's folded over. And once I've got those, I take my pocket, I have the offset square in that. I line it up with the square on the vest. And then I stitch along the sides and the top, and then the other side. And I cut a nice crisp edge on the little welt flap here. Crisp. And I'm going to wedge it underneath inside of that little pocket that I've made there. I'm going to stitch that final bottom line. I'm going to cut in the middle here. I'm making kind of a Y shape to snip into the corners on each end. So just like that, I'm going to stuff everything through that hole. What should emerge from that is this little black rectangle, and then inside is the pocket flap. We give this a good pressing, and then on the other side, the pocket is still open, so I'm just going to stitch around the edge of the actual pocket piece. I like to do 2 layers of stitching just to prevent any potential holes from forming. And back here on the front, I have to sew it on this flap, and you can either do it by hand, but I like to do it by machine because I just think it ends up looking a little bit neater. And then there we've got a welt pocket. So I'm going to repeat that on the other side. The lining's not too much different. Pocket though, this front piece, I have the upper inside of the lapel. Very simple, just sewing along that line and then just pressing it open. Normally when I'm making a vest or doublet or something like that, I leave the sides open and sew it up at the shoulders. And the final stitch to kind of bring it all together is along the sides. However, this particular vest style, I'm actually doing it opposite, where I'll be sewing up the sides first and then leaving the top shoulder here as the open part. And that's because it has this weird little fold over lapel, and there's just no way to sew that any other way. Well, I mean, technically you could still kind of do it through this, but this is the easier way to do it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it that way. Yay! So instead, I'm still going to sew up the side, but on the lining, I'm only going to sew up about 1 inch from the edges, leaving a big gap in the middle. Actually, I'm only going to do it to one side. Look at me being smart. Sewing is a puzzle. That is one of the reasons that I like it, because there's many different ways you can finish it, and it's all about figuring out how to get to the final solution. Got all these pieces, now you got to figure out how to put them together. And the way, and the style, and the fit, and the order that you put that together, affects the end result. Doing it the way that I'm doing it, it's going to make a stronger shoulder and also give me a bigger hole to kind of work through, instead of having to work through just the 4-inch slit in the top of the vest, which is how I learned how to do this style. But now I've learned, and I'm going to try it, which is again kind of the point of doing a mock-up. Right, and so I've just stitched the lining to the outer shell, and then I'm just stitching all the way around the outside, leaving the shoulders open. All right, now I've clipped all the corners and curves, and now I flip it all inside out. So I flipped everything inside out and gave it a good press. And then at the top of the front that has the lapel on, I've just stitched the open and close. I've notched where the fold goes. It goes down to the edge of the curve here. And I'm just going to press that fold and then stitch it down. So now everything I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to be doing through that hole that I left on the side. But I need to insert this front section of the shoulder into the back section of the shoulder. And once I tuck it in and pull it through, the corners should match up, and I can just stitch straight across. Okay, now once I pull it through again, ta-da, I've got my finished little shoulder. I do have to give it a nice little press, but that looks pretty good. Do the same thing to the other shoulder. And of course now, I can try it on, and a bit of a bummer, it is about 2 inches too tight. Which is one of the things I worried about, which is why I went to the effort of making all this. Very simple fix. I just add on 1/2 inch to the pattern on each edge here. But the things that I wanted to test out, the shoulders are exactly what I want them. It is laying correctly, not bunching up in the back. I like where the pockets are. I like how the lapel looks. Very simple fix. I'm very glad I did that because this would have been very bummer to have gone through all the process and for it to have been a little too tight. However, this does look really nice just worn open, which is actually how I wear my vest normally anyways. So not a total loss. But I'm running out of time. I'm not going to do buttons on this. I'll do that later. And now now I can start on the real vest. So this is the rough size template for the embroidery. And I've just kind of been placing it around the pattern piece, which I've extended to fit a little bit better. And I think I figured out kind of where I want it to be, spacing them 5 inches apart and 5 inches apart this way as well. And that's going to give me enough of a pattern that kind of fits with where the lapel is and fills up the space without having to do like tons of kind of partial ones. With this layout, I only have to do 5 on each side, so 10, so a little over 10 hours of embroidery. All right, now that I've got this, all right, so I've gridded it out in chalk. I'm just going to do a tester piece first. I'm going to do that for 2 reasons. One, I want to see if I can just use the fabric or if I am going to have to like stabilize it with an interfacing. And 2, I'm actually just going to be using regular sewing thread for this. Now, embroidery it's a little bit thinner, and it's a lot shinier. But because I'm pairing this up with a cotton velvet that is very matte, I kind of want the embroidery to be matte against the satin. And I want to see what that looks like. And I also want to make sure that this thread will work and that it's not going to break or knot up or look funny. So I've got it all hooped up here, and now we find out how this is going to work. Well, it's looking exactly how I want it, but the thread broke. Now, if a thread breaks, all I have to do is go back. Oh, well, excuse me. Just have to go back about 10 stitches. Whatever. And that'll kind of cover it before the machine realized there wasn't thread. So it's not a huge deal if the thread breaks. Like, I'm going to be sitting here watching it anyways. But I'm going to see if I can get through this pattern. If that's the only break, I'll stick with it. But if it breaks like several times, I have to come up with a better solution. I'm at the bargaining with God level on this. If it doesn't break the rest of the pattern, I really like how it looks. This is not the machine or the pattern. This is because I paid $4 for an entire spool of industrial shitty grade cotton thread. Polyester thread, not even cotton. It is my own fault. But hey, it was an experiment, and that is the point of this. This is broken on me 7 times. It looks exactly how I want it, but I don't think I can do this. I'm going to switch to a little bit higher quality thread and see if that does it. It's a little less matte, but it might work. I don't know what happened there. I think this thread is just too thick. You can see it's a little bit more shiny. So I ended up switching back to the cheap thread. Broke a grand total of 9 times, but it's doing exactly what I wanted to do. So, like, just look at how much that nice matches that velvet. So it's just going to be a long night. I could just reset this with the stabilizer every single time that I am centering something. Or I can take 2 long pieces and stitch them down the middle and then sew the fabric onto it. And I'm going to do that. All right, so there it is, all attached to the stabilizer. So this is giving me extra room so that I can actually center it. As you can see, the fabric doesn't actually quite reach to the end of the hoop. But now it does because it's a stabilizer. Yay! And we're back at it. All right, 1/2 of the vest is embroidered. This is taking so long. After a very long amount of time done embroidery, I've cleaned up the stabilizer, and now I have placed my 2 sides together as evenly as I can. I'm placing the center of my vest pattern on the center of the front little pattern here. Whenever I'm working with a velvet, I have to kind of determine where the nap is. The nap is kind of the direction the fiber's going. I always prefer the nap to be going down. But to figure that out, you kind of have to feel it. So if I rub my hand this way, it feels nice. If I rub my hand, that was the bad direction. Feels better this way. And going up is the worst of all, which means that my nap is facing downwards and this direction. But because it feels the worst going this direction, I want this to be the top. And so that's the direction I'm going to orient all my pieces so that they are going in that direction. So the sewing is pretty much nearly identical. I'm working a little bit faster just because the satin does thread pretty heavily, and I chose not to pink it like I did when I was doing the embroidery because I'm lazy. But same exact process otherwise, so I'm not going to waste time filming it. All right, the vest is all sewn together just as I was with the red one, but this time I want to put buttons on it. I've got my little button spacer. I bought 8 buttons, so I could put 8 buttons on here, but that doesn't leave any extras for like if one falls off. 7, which would be a great number because it's kind of spooky, would be good, except it's going to put a button right in the middle of the face there. 6 isn't too bad. It avoids the middle of the face. So now I got to figure out if I want them a little bit closer or if I'd rather have 1 extra for if it pops off. Yeah, that's too many buttons. Yeah, I like that spacing better. Hey, 6 it is. Buttons to match the buttonholes, a little bit of lace for the back, and then that's done. The last thing is I want to take this last one and make a hat like this. Top pattern piece, make it 2 stripes for the like cap part, so 1 inch of velvet and 2 inches of satin. For expediency, we use a rotary cutter and just cut out strips. So on the satin, I'm going to also applique this lace. So there's all my strips sewn together, and then I just connect the end, clipped it, and I am spreading it out over the little circle thing. Now once I've sewn and serged that edge, I can just flip it inside out, and then I just have to stitch a tassel in the middle, and there we've got it. A little subtle makeup. All right, the audio got a little bit messed up, so I had to re-record this, but here I am at the actual wedding. Here is me after the wedding and what I wore for just kind of the after part. I absolutely love how this project turned out. Everything fit pretty well.
The robes here, you'll get a better look at. Really gave that ministerial officiant look. Everyone really knew kind of exactly what I was there for. Really loved the balance of it. It worked out perfectly. It was nice and flowy, very comfortable. And then, of course, I could just peel this whole thing off, and underneath was what I was wearing for the reception afterwards. And I really really love how this turned out. It was a lot of work to center all of that. Oh, there's a piece of candy from it was a lot of work to center that pattern onto this vest, but the colors turned out, the embroidery turned out really well. Absolutely worth all of the trouble. And now all the only thing that's left is me trying to figure out where on earth I can wear this afterwards, because I need more excuses.